working on breath awareness for scoliosis, not just for the curves, but a lot of it is to work on our nervous system. So really using our breath, even though it is part of the autonomic nervous system, that's always automatic, right? But being able to use it in different ways so we can shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic. And then that puts us in a place where we will feel better, but then we can also heal and put our mind and body into a different place.
Hello and welcome to the Postural Dojo Podcast. My name is Sam Miller. I'll be your host on this postural transformation journey, sharing some stories of my own healing journey of an 85-degree hyperkyphal scoliosis, and speaking with experts from some fields you might expect and some that might be a bit surprising. Today, I'm excited to have Vivian Doan on the podcast, who is entering into an area that I love to go into. It's the connection between the brain and the body, a highly underestimated area when it comes to looking at how we're going to start recovering, restoring, rebuilding our best and highest posture. I do believe our bodies and our postures are an extension of our mind. So, Vivian, I'm looking forward to diving into this podcast with you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
How did you end up in this area?
So for me, I started getting into scoliosis, specializing scoliosis, and creating a methodology called Scolio Fitness that you might have seen based on my personal experience with scoliosis and then also my education. So I was in a whole different, I've always been in health and wellness, but I also had that as like my side job. I was teaching bar classes, yoga, and everything. But what happened was during my yoga teacher training, I started noticing my rib starting protruding a little bit more in front. And then in the back are my like convex side, which I call my hill, was starting to protrude more from the back. So then I was like, this is interesting. So went to get an x-ray and my curves had actually increased from doing yoga. When really most of the time when you go to the doctor, something they always tell you, oh, just go do yoga, right? It fixes everything, right? Which it doesn't, because it's very different for everyone's body. So from there, I dug into specifically yoga for scoliosis, decided to just shift my entire career and went back to school for a degree in physical therapy, bridged the gap between fitness and physical therapy. And then from there, it's just evolved, incorporating a lot of integrative health, because I'm a big believer in the importance of your lifestyle practices and habits. And then now finding just how important everything goes back to what we have in here, our brain and our mind. And that's what's going to create the biggest transformation physically with our curves, our posture, and then also, of course, mentally and emotionally as well.
So, thank you for going on this. I know, like, as someone who is experiencing this themselves, they can really start seeing this from a really profound and intimate perspective, which is really valuable when it comes to this. I'm curious, what part of yoga do you think contributed to that continuing of the collapse in the curve? And which part do you take from yoga now onwards?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm not trying to say that I don't do yoga anymore or that all yoga is bad or it's going to make things worse. For me, it was because when I was first diagnosed with scoliosis, I was told to wait and see, which is not the best. Now, when you look back, it's like not the best way of doing things because you're just taking a very passive approach. In a way, it was great because I never felt limited in the activity that I can do. Like I grew up playing tennis, softball, did everything that I wanted to do. But then that also meant that I ignored my scoliosis. So when I'm in a yoga class, when you're in a class, even though in yoga it's all about letting go of the ego and everything, right? When you're in a class with 30 students and the teacher's telling you to do a pose, you're going to get into the pose, right? Because that's just what you do, and you're going to try to make it look as pretty or whatever as everybody else is doing it, even though that's not the point of yoga. So I was doing a lot of twisting, and especially because I was in a teacher training, then of course I wanted to make sure I could do all the poses, and I wasn't in pain. So I was doing all the things, but of course since I have my curves, it's one side's I'm going to be able to twist a lot better to one side because our body moves in that path. But then that means I was accentuating the curves. So that's why I dug into how important it is to make sure you're practicing yoga, doing fitness, doing any of your daily activities with more of that body awareness of what's best for you. So what I stress with a lot of people is it's not just us with scoliosis that need to try a different variation. Like everybody should look different in a yoga pose because everyone's body is built differently.
Okay. So you would say it's doing some of the poses, especially the twists, without awareness, that were probably not a great idea in yoga.
Yeah, for me personally, because I was twisting more to one side. Yeah, and especially because I wasn't in pain, so it wasn't like my body was telling me to stop doing it. So I just kept doing it, and it was the repetitive motion. But I'm sure there was a lot of other things that impacted that at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly that feeling of, okay, everyone else is doing it. I don't want to be the only one not doing it, so I'm going to try and do this thing, even though I'm pushing into a place that it's not ideal for my curve. So that's an important aspect to that and doing something once is different than doing it repetitively and doing it a lot, and then even pushing those limits as well. People ask me, can I go running? And my question again comes back to that exact thing. What is your awareness when you're moving from one foot to the other and you're generating this force throughout your entire body? What is your awareness of the compression and decompression that's happening, your breath, your structure? What is your awareness of how that is happening? Because without that, there's potential worsening of the curve. But with that, there's potential improvement of it as you're breathing and expanding into each moment that you're in this anti-gravity state and you're actually able to restructure in that space. So it does come down to that awareness. And then, so which things have you taken with you on your journey from yoga into what you do now?
Yeah, so now of course, a lot of the breath work, right? And then combining that with the physical therapy, what I learned in physical therapy with the breath work for expanding and opening up your concave side and everything too, to help with more of that opening of the ribs. And just in general, a big piece of what I do, and the first thing that I always do with everyone, is working on breath awareness for scoliosis, not just for the curves, but a lot of it is to work on our nervous system. So really using our breath, even though it is part of the autonomic nervous system, that's always automatic, right? But being able to use it in different ways so we can shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic. And then that puts us in a place where we will feel better, but then we can also heal our mind and body into a different place as well.
Using the brain and the breath, I imagine certain intentions. And what would be an example of how we could apply this? Maybe is there a simple way that somebody could practice a thought and then embody that using a breath? Is there something we could do to show them that this is possible?
Yeah. The first thing I always teach, you've heard of you do the 360 diaphragmatic breath, right? Yeah, so doing that. So a lot of times what I'll have people do, so if you want to do it with me, we'll start with one hand on your chest, one hand down by your belly. And I'm not trying to get into a belly breath, right? That's what you see kids doing sometimes, but we actually want a 360 expansion of the ribs, right? So from the front, the back, and from the sides. But the first thing I always like to do is I want to make sure that when you're breathing, it's not only in your top hand, right? So if we're taking a breath in, so if anyone's listening or watching, if you want, you can close your eyes. And I always like to think about shifting towards midline if you can. Think about wearing like a big crown on your head that's lifting up towards the ceiling, right? So I like to tell my clients, if you want to imagine you have a big bunch of balloons at the top of your head, like in the movie Up, right? So think about those big balloons at the top of your head getting up nice and tall. From here, just close your eyes and take a big breath in through your nose. And then slowly exhale. Good. Let's do that one more time. Take another breath in. And then slowly exhale. So the first thing is to ask, did you notice, are you breathing into your top hand or your bottom hand?
Say evenly on both.
Even on both? Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we will feel both because your breath is coming down towards here. But we want to make sure if someone is breathing only into the top hand, then you'll see how the accessory muscles are working, right? My shoulders are coming up instead of using the breath here. Mm-hmm. So what we want to try to do is bring the breath more down towards the bottom hand. And then from there, what you can do is you can take a towel if you have, I'm going to have a towel I'm going to grab here. Or of course, if you had a TheraBand, a resistance band, a scarf, anything that you have. And you can just hold it here and just hold it at your bottom ribs. Okay. And then if you don't have a towel, you can also place your hands here, or I like to even place my hands across like you're giving yourself a nice hug. Okay. So from here, same thing. We're going to breathe in through our nose, right? So they're really important, that tongue posture, also to making sure that we have good breathing, is now we want to breathe into the towel. So taking the big breath in through your nose and breathe into the lower lobes of your lungs. And then as you exhale, I want you to extend the exhale and make it even longer than the inhale if you can. So again, taking a breath in, feeling the ribs expand, and then slowly exhaling. So if you're able to double your exhale, that's going to shift you into that more parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're breathing in for 2, try to breathe out for 4. But I don't want to put any pressure on it, right? So it's just whatever, just try to extend the exhale and make that slower. So did you feel a little bit more relaxed by feeling that? By using the towel, you're giving yourself some feedback. Then you know where to breathe. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to always feel that opening and then releasing. How did that feel for you?
Very nice. Yeah, that feedback is amazing. Sometimes we think that we're just breathing in the front. And really my focus with my breathing is to bring it into the back, especially the lower back below the rib cage. I think that's a great place to training the breath. And then when we get into the rotational angular breathing with the Schroth method, it's also about breathing to the side first and then to the back to get that kind of derotation of the rotation of the scoliosis.
Yeah, definitely. So then with the towel there, it's like that side where I call the valley, right, in Scolio Fitness. So you want to breathe into that valley. And then as you exhale, you're thinking about that front rib coming in and back as well to kind of help with that deep rotation.
Yeah, so that's a great way to start realizing that, with a little bit of calm, a little bit of intention, a little bit of patience, and that feedback that you had with the towel, you can actually start directing your breath into new areas of your body. And often the same way that our brain and our thought patterns travel 95% of the same way it did yesterday, the same way our breath is traveling through our body as well. And if we want to change that, then it's going to take intention and patience and slowly shifting the direction of that river. And that's essentially what those corrective breathing methods tap into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I know breath work has become so popular too, right? So everyone's doing some form of it. But sometimes it can be stressful for people if they can't feel that breath, right? If you haven't, like you said, it takes that patience and that practice. Or if you're focusing on it too much, if you hyperventilate, or if you're not getting it right, I don't want that to be an added stressor, right? So sometimes it's also applying different neurology practices that kind of help you automatically get into a slower breath without that slower breath too. Mm-hmm. That people can do.
That breath is that accelerator or decelerator of the whole system. So by extending those exhales, we slow down the nervous system. We create more relaxation. And if we have contraction or tension or restrictions in the body, that's a great time to be bringing in some relaxation, especially when we're into these types of movements. And we're potentially beginning to reprogram some of the feelings and the emotions that we have in those certain areas. If somebody has a chronic repetition of thoughts that might be wearing them down, that might be giving up hope, or a depressive type of thought that will eventually be reflected in the body. And so it would make sense to start looking at how we can choose thoughts and patterns that are beginning to build that strength, that confidence, that pride that will be reflected in the posture as well. I'm really curious how you approach that that neuromuscular connection, that brain-body connection. How do you perceive that? Let's start with why, when we're talking about scoliosis, why are we paying attention to the brain?
Yeah, because the brain will controls everything, right? So whether we have scoliosis or not, like that plays such a big thing into it. And by shifting, like what we just did, to that parasympathetic state, right? So we're going from that stress, like the fight or flight, to that parasympathetic, that rest and digest, right? It will help by getting into a different mind state with the breath there. That will also help your brain and body be more receptive to different things, right? For instance, when we're in that stress state, then your brain, your mind, and all the neurotransmitters that are created, right? The rise in cortisol, the stress, all the stress hormones and everything. It's the same thing as if we're getting chased by a tiger, right? Our body, the mind doesn't know the difference, still producing the same type of hormones. And when you're in that state, of course, your only thing is about surviving. I need to run as fast as I can. I need to go. Versus once you can slow things down a little bit and get into more of that more calm state, then you'll be able to think a little bit more out of the box, right? Or you'll let your body actually heal or move in different ways versus just trying to get out of this survival state.
Yeah, and sometimes we think, oh, it's the tiger in the bushes or the predator in the bushes that is going to cause us to get in that state. But in our modern world, when we get an email that say, hey, budget cuts are coming, or this project ended, or some feedback from a team, something, some drama, some situation is going on with your work, with your family, other things, even we're just tapping and we're watching videos. Our brain doesn't really know the difference of this is a screen and it's in a different place, and it's just responding to what it perceives as real, which is whatever you're feeding it in that moment. And so that fear protective brace, or that freeze, or that flight and fight response is happening just at a really low level, but over quite a lot of times throughout the day if we're not careful. And that's a low level kind of state of tension in the body. And I've suddenly been very curious about how the spinal cord has been found to be in a proportionally kind of shortened state in people with scoliosis. So it has this kind of contraction or shortening in relation to the spinal column. So the spinal cord being that noodle that extends from the brain and then branches into the rest of the body, right through the middle of the spinal column is shortened. And then we see this warping in the spinal column, which is essentially that protective and functional bracing of the spinal cord. So when I've started being curious about this and starting to implementing, like applying the consequences of this in my mind, as in when I'm in a position where my body needs to be in a state of elongated and aligned strength to perform that movement or that position, and I intentionally enter my mind into a state of relaxation, state of peace, state of safety. I am safe. I trust. Literally these words. I'm literally saying these words in my mind. And I feel the allowance. I feel the releasing of that contraction. And therefore I feel the alignment happening in that moment from pure thought, from pure just putting in a new story when I'm in that position during a movement or an exercise. So I know this to be true in my own experience when it comes to healing. What methods are out there right now that are becoming more and more adopted? What do you want to kind of get out there around this kind of idea?
Yeah, I love that you do that, and it's so like our words are so powerful. So it's amazing how you have been able to feel that and witness it like in your body. And a lot of the practices that I do, it's based on neurology and neuroscience. So there's different pieces of it. The first part is working with different practices that are going to work on all the nerves, like our cranial nerves that are going to the brain to rewire the neural networks there. So some of that would be, for example, working on like eye exercises and how that plays into your posture and also even your pain. And then from there can get your body into also enhanced performance, right? And then because if you're, like for instance, right now, like what you were talking about, like just all this little stressors that we have in our body, in our life that kind of create that heightened state. And then also just the world is a crazy place and it continues to be more and more, right? So there's enough hard things in our life already. So just trying to make things easier for everyone, right? One of those things is when we are, because of our lifestyle, we are like either at the computer and we're hunched over, right? Or you're on your phone and you look down like this. So our eyes actually aren't moving in all the ways that it should be moving, right? So the eye exercises plays a big part into it. So even if you go work on convergence, right, looking here and going far out, so it's even that peripheral vision, you'll notice how that shifts your posture. And it also will shift your breath. So do you notice as you're bringing your finger out and you widen your view?
Yeah.
Do you notice how you're sitting up a little taller and your breath kind of changes?
Mm-hmm.
And then so when we're working the muscles in all different directions of our eyes, then it's actually also signaling to our brain that we're safer, because that means if anything's coming at us from this side or this side, I know that I can see it, so I will be safer.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom used to do brain gym kinesiology exercises, so we'd do a lot of figure eights. The figure eight being a great kind of 360 perspective, whether it's in the hips or in the eyes, that figure eight is a great kind of 360-degree audit of movement.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a big one, right? And then, of course, the visual system will play into the vestibular system, which will help with the balance and coordination. And then that plays into our proprioception, which is what most people go to first with scoliosis, but actually all of it has to play together. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of the brain-body connection that I work with in that piece.
Yeah.
And then the other side is more of the neuroscience side of like rewiring a lot of these like subconscious thoughts that might come up. So for you, it sounds like saying I am safe, like that those things feel true to you. But for everyone, it's going to be different, right? So really working with people to make sure that the affirmations or mantras or beliefs that you're telling yourself isn't going to be rejected by your subconscious either. For instance, on social media, you might see all these affirmations that say, I am worthy or I am deserving, right? And for me personally, those don't really resonate because it almost makes me feel like, oh, I deserve something after I do something. Whereas for someone else, it might be more beneficial. But for me, it's almost like I have to do something in order to deserve something. It feels better for me to use an affirmation like it feels good too. Or because we want the affirmations to be true for us so that the mind doesn't reject it, right? So sometimes we can't just go like from one, like if you're in pain and be like, I'm not in pain, because your body's like, no, well, you are in pain. So it's like, I'm in the process of healing. Right? So there's like different ways to go about it. And it's going to be very individual for each person, depending, of course, on their subconscious beliefs of when they were growing up, different experiences that they've had, conditioning from the environment, what we've been told by society, from our families, friends, things like that too.
When there is a trauma, let's say, it could even be emotionally or physically. My perspective is that sometimes we don't need to know exactly what it was, but at least in my case, I feel like I want to go there. I want to go to that scene of the crime, that reaction, that moment of injury, and then from there, reprogram, rewrite the story that I'm holding in my body in that particular position. And it's part of that same, instead of in the physical sense, it's like when there's tightness, when I'm going towards tightness, instead of being like, oh, there's tightness, like that's tight, like that's it. Sometimes we feel like that's not us. It's, oh, my legs are tight. That's your brain. That is you, right? And you do have, you might be thinking, oh, relax, but it's not relaxing, but it's just been doing that for years potentially, and it's going to take some time to reprogram that. Just like trying to turn a raging river at 90 degrees to the left is going to be really difficult, but we can just get 1 degree at a time and slowly start changing the program, the direction of that program. And that's how I approach it. I guess by infiltrating it with a new program. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. And I love what you said about just like a little bit at a time, because it's all about just giving ourselves grace along this journey too. Like you said, it's not going to all of a sudden turn the river 90 degrees right away. It's those little things add up to big wins. So it's just like being patient, giving yourself grace. Sometimes it might take a little detour, but you're still going to get where you are as long as you know the destination of where you want to go with it.
I think so. More people are now familiar with Tony Robbins, who does like the power poses to shift the energy in his body. Are we like talking about something similar, but that's a bit more medically precise for somebody with a compromised posture that they might be able to do in their bodies to reprogram a stronger posture?
Yeah, no, that's your posture, even though there is no perfect posture, right? And we shouldn't be in one posture all day, but there is that piece of how your psychology impacts your physiology impacts your psychology, right? So it's like that. I always call it like our power posture, right? So it's like using that, like shifting towards midline, getting really standing grounded to the floor, standing up. But it also, as you notice when we did the breathing, it's like when we are in a certain posture, you're able to breathe a little bit better too, right? So then your mind is a little bit clearer, and then you're able to think different things versus being in that survival mode. So that plays into it. So it's also just like how you, like that perception of you have if somebody's walking just like always hunched over and looking down versus someone who's going to be standing like gazing out a little bit more, which plays into things too. And like you said, how the body it remembers like certain emotions and feelings with certain body positions, right? Like you said, when it like locks up in different areas too.
And so in your experience, it seems like everyone's requires a different kind of approach here. Obviously, like each compromised posture or compromised spine, there's so many different ways to compromise it, from the psychological, emotional aspect, the physical aspect. There's so many different things that can compromise an ideal structure and potentially trigger these collapses. But it is in our realm to do something about it. And when the doctors say wait and see, I think they should more accurately be saying that to themselves and being like, okay, let's see what you can do about it. And here's a bunch of things you can do. And that's one of the big messages that I'd like to get out there, is that it just because that doctor who usually has bracing or surgery as their treatment options, if you're fortunate, they will have a shot-trained physio who will at least get you onto the direction of empowering your breath and your movement to build that. That's more of the more kind of mainstream accepted empowered approach at the moment. How do you approach someone who's dealing with a scoliotic curve? How do you work with them when they come to you?
Yeah, so a lot of times once they come to me, they have gone to all the doctors, like what you said, right? And they've gone to Schroth, or they might still be going to Schroth, or they've wore a brace, or they've had surgery, or maybe they are trying to avoid surgery, right? And all of those methods focus solely on the back. And I work with people in a very more like holistic way, as you can probably tell from what we've been talking about. And I know holistic can get thrown around, right? Some people say holistic because if it's just like they do meditation or different things, but it is really that whole, the tie of the mind, the body, the spiritual, like all of it together. So I look a lot at the body as a whole, right? So the posture, like the feet, our jaw, our eyes, those are such big pieces of our posture. Like sometimes I don't even, of course I always do a body mapping and curve assessment. So I have to take pictures, do an Adams forward bend test. So we see and they have that awareness of their back. But all those other foundational pieces have to be in place for things to shift in the back and for pain to shift and for the posture to shift as well. Looking at all those pieces, but then at the same time, their lifestyle. So what are their environment, what's their environment like that can also cause certain stressors? And not just relationships or life stuff, but also just, is it EMF exposure? Is it light? Are they not, is it the nutrition? But it's not just what we eat, but it's also how our body's absorbing all the nutrients and everything as well, right? And a big piece of that is literally going back to like very foundational things that because our world has advanced so much that we have forgotten in a way. So a lot of what I bring in is a lot of ancestral health and quantum healing as well. So making sure a lot of our energy that we're getting is also like from the earth, right? So that grounding, that light, it's not just from our food. And it's also like, how is your mitochondria working in order to make sure you're not inflamed so that you don't have the pain, so that your body is in a different state to get into a better position too. So there's so many different pieces to it, but it's really going down the foundations. Are those in place before we can get to the next place as well?
Amazing. Yeah. I think for that reason that there's so many different things to look at, that holistic approach. In the conventional medical system, you get very specialized kind of people. And if you're in the right place, there's someone who's bringing together all these different fields to be able to apply it for your situation. And then, yeah, I think as you mentioned there, I think where we're going is where we've been before in the past, which is probably in some form of loving, supportive community, barefoot, dancing around the fire to music and chanting and singing to elevate the state of flow and ecstasy in the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because even like what you said about saying like, I am safe, like when you're doing a workout and want to make sure that you don't hurt yourself or you can get deeper into a position or something, that is like that sound frequency that it's not just in your mind, it's like your body is like resonating with that, right? So, but we need to make sure that the body is able to use that in the right way. So it's like all the things we're feeding into ourselves, there's so many pieces to it. I know that for scoliosis, so many people want to find like the genetic link to it sometimes, or, it's because of this and that's why I have this, or it's because of my scoliosis that I have this and this. When it's actually, and it's not, I don't want to, let's see, like for me personally, I don't want to make it like this is my identity, right? But it's the epigenetics that is really important that people forget to look at sometimes. And the cool part though is the epigenetics we can change to change the expression of things and how we feel.
Yeah.
Emotionally and physically.
Yes. Every cell in our body is slowly reprinting itself. And that reprinting is happening depending on how we are maintaining our state and to what alchemical environment we're reproducing these cells into, all the way to our bones. And I manage my expectations. I know I have a hemivertebrae, which is a wedge-shaped vertebrae in the T10. So I know that I've got some pretty severe kind of limitations for some of the progress that I can expect. There's so much I can be doing. And if I'm on this path now, 39 years old, over 10 years, 20 years, the path that I'm on is going to determine the quality of my life over that. And the sooner we begin, the better at any age. And anyone, even if someone has an uncompromised spine, is still going to have to move and work out and do things for their wellness to have a great quality of life. So there's no difference there, but there's certainly extra skills, extra intention, and certainly another level of depth into how deeply your body is inviting you to come inside and to get to know what's going on. When you were speaking, it reminded me of one that I was actually just doing last night, lying on a bed. So my back had plenty of room to move as I needed. And I was bringing my knees up to my chest and bringing that in. And over the last 4 or 5 years, the closeness that I've been able to get the knees due to the tightness in the hip flexors, it's been improving so much, and I applied exactly what we're talking about here, which is, okay, I'm feeling that tightness, and you feel that tightness in your brain, in your face, in your neck. You're like, oh, it's tight, I can't do it anymore. And when you're there, and then you move your mind to a place of slowing down the exhales, I'm safe. I can do this. And just for a moment, if you're able to throw your imagination to a body that doesn't have this tightness, and you're like, just for a moment, I'm going to pretend I don't have that tightness. Just take one, I'm just going to pretend for one breath that I don't have that restriction there, and I'm just going to let it happen. I'm just going to play pretend. And there it goes. You can physically, tangibly see that. And that it'll give you the proof that you need. It'll give you that empowerment that is the placebo effect. We believe that person in the white lab coat giving us that pill that's been studied to help, and I believe that pill's going to work. I believe that pill's going to work, and that's the only reason it's going to work, because it's like a dud pill. It's no actual healing ingredient in it, but it's that power of that belief that that something is actually happening, that actually instructs your body to heal. And that's exactly what we're tapping into. So if you take a moment to find that proof for yourself, I think that's just such a great first step, because that'll set you on a very healthy long-term track in your life to know that you have the power to do something about your situation.
Yeah. Because the same thing of like how we were talking at the beginning of our mind doesn't know the difference between getting chased by a tiger or the stressors that we're having now. So it doesn't know the difference between that, what's real and pretend. So you telling yourself at that moment, I don't feel tight, or not even I don't feel tight, but I feel nice and mobile. And so that's your brain. Okay, there you are. But it's also, and I know it sounds so simple that sometimes we're like, wait, no, it has to be harder than that. But the cool thing is that the more you do that, right? So you do that every day, you do it more often, then you are living that in your body, right? And a lot of that is that subconscious reprogramming that I do with like hypnosis that I work with clients on as they rework their beliefs around things. Because it's shifting into that identity of somebody who is pain-free, or repeating those affirmations. Like I always repeat the affirmations of bringing my curves towards midline while keeping the natural curves of my back. There's just different ways to kind of program that, because then you step into that person more, right? And you walk a little differently with your posture because of it, or you feel a little bit more open in your body.
Mm-hmm. Yes. An amazing way to start the day, especially when you start your day like this. To win your day, you really got to win that morning. And to win the morning, those first moments when you wake up and your brain waves are still in between that dreamlike and reality state, it's a great moment to start implanting some of these new beliefs that might be more beneficial for your situation. I'm curious, you mentioned some of the quantum healing, ancestral healing. What have you got your eyes on in the future in this space of postural correction? What do you see? Like, where's your curiosity taking you in terms of what's happening in like really modern futuristic medical approaches right now?
A lot of that is with just getting to like that deeper level of just like the mitochondrial, like keeping our cells like healthy, right? And by using that quantum health, like by using the power of like light and everything, and how that plays into like our bone health and our bone healing, and how that can play into the scoliosis and everything as well. Just because I know with a lot of scoliosis, then we get concerned about osteoporosis and everything as well. The other parts of bone health that are not just strength training. That's a piece of it. It's a very important piece.
Yeah.
But there's more to it.
Yeah.
And it's not just taking vitamin D and calcium, because that's not what I would normally recommend.
Yeah.
For my clients.
So looking at some of the more advanced techniques that are coming through about bone health, light, for me, definitely sound as well. There's the mechanotransduction, which is essentially that cells transform based on the stimulus they're presented with. So that's how we're actually able to strengthen the bones by putting them under different pressure. We're actually increasing the strength of those bones.
Yeah, I love that.
So where can people find what you do, and how are you currently offering to assist people on their healing journey?
So right now, if you can always message me on Instagram, and I can share a lot more there. I'm at Day, D-A-T-H, Viv, V-I-V, so Day with Viv, or you can find me at Scolio Fitness. And I have a Scolio Fitness membership, so we have a community of people from all over the world, and we work together on our physical, mental, and emotional health. And there's monthly sessions and some live sessions. And then what I have is our toolkit, which is a video portal online that has over 300 videos on there that people can access from anywhere. And then for those who want to get their results a little bit faster or want a little bit more accountability with things, then I have an accelerator program as well.
Awesome.
And then I have some bone health stuff coming up. So
Okay.
depending on when this comes out, I can hear about it.
There we go. Amazing. Vivian, thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences and your wisdom and your insight. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved chatting with you today.
Cheers.